Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all again. I hope you're continuing to enjoy a fantastic first day of GCF 2023. It's wonderful to be back on this hallowed stage with another fantastic panel. Our topic is obsolescence, the long or maybe the short goodbye. We shall have to debate and see. In today's world, with such rapidly advancing technology, the life cycle of critical systems is becoming ever shorter. So what exposure, what challenges, what threats does that pose to organizations around the world today? And what can we do to traverse these waters to mitigate those dangerous times? So I have all the answers in my learned friends to my left. You've heard them introduced, but let me come to you each individually first, just to set the scene. Tell me a bit about your role and your remit, and what you bring to this conversation today. Major General Majid Singh, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you for being here. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. At the very outset, let me thank the global cybersecurity team for having invited us to speak on an important issue such as obsolescence. I also thank the moderator who has introduced us, and to my fellow panelists to be all here. Let's hope we have a great discussion on the topic. Obsolescence, in my initial thoughts, is something I would like to say that it's not a new concept. It's been practiced all over. It's been practiced by the militaries, wherein they do lay down certain percentages of what do they really maintain in their inventories? Say 30% of the equipment which is obsolete or in the obsolescence phase, about 40% is current, and there is 30% wherein the induction of the modern technology or the modern equipment happens. So 30, 40, 30 concept. Some people may practice 20, 60, 20 concept, depending upon various factors of technology, regulation, the budgets, the HR, all those constraints. So, however, in light of the technological advancements, the going analog to digital, the user aspirations, the market-driven forces, our aspirations, our security requirements, all that has really speeded up the way the obsolescence is happening. So therefore, it's really become a challenge to take care of that cycle of obsolescence. And however, the bottom line is that we should be able to maintain the functionality as also maintain the security. So we have to maintain a very fine balance between the two and ensure that we have a cycle wherein we are able to manage obsolescence.
Thank you so much. Ben, nice to see you again. Familiar face in Saudi Arabia. Hope you're enjoying GCF 2023. Tell us a little bit more about what you do for those who might be unfamiliar.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be back here 2 years running. I work at Dragos. So Dragos is focused on obsolescence systems at the end of the day. We focus on defending and securing industrial control systems, sometimes called operational technology. And in my role at Dragos, I'll lead the services team. So our incident response team, our assessments team, the teams that do preparedness and checks against the defenses. And so in many ways, what I'm representing today is not so much Dragos, but our customers at large and what we see from that ground level.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Yassin, nice to see you. How are you today?
Thank you.
Talk to me a little bit about, from your point of view, when it comes to Tunisia and the importance of not only core systems, but obsolescence.
Yeah, this is a great issue that we should discuss carefully when we deal with critical infrastructure, because there is many factors that should be considered when we look carefully to the component of critical infrastructure. So we will find that there is a dependency between the software and the hardware for each component in the most cases. We are updating, we will update software the first time, the second time, but at the moment there is a limit, there is a point where we stop because the hardware does not respond. And this will initiate for us the process to replace such hardware in order to be able to continue providing the needed service by this critical infrastructure. This is an important point. Now, this timeout between the instant where the system does not provide the needed hardware properties may lead to a set of threats regarding our critical infrastructure, and this is most dangerous because we are providing critical services, and at this time we are not able to provide this service in an efficient manner. Means that there is something that is missing. There is some vulnerabilities related to these systems that may be exploited by attacker to engender damage to this infrastructure. In this way, from the Tunisian experience, we have tried to focus on a major component that is the regulation. And we have defined since 2023 a new law for cybersecurity, since we have a law that is dated from 2004. And in this year, we have elaborated a new law text for cybersecurity, and we have dedicated for critical infrastructure a chapter and a set of clauses that should be respected by major company. So this is very important, and this is the first step if we need to help company to be compliant with the requirement of critical infrastructure. So this is a first point that should be discussed here regarding the regulation that should be up to date, followed by the strategy that should be also up to date in a country regarding critical infrastructure.
Thank you very much. Policy and regulation will definitely be discussed, absolutely so important to our conversation. Joshua, let me come to you. From the standpoint of SIRAR by STC, how are we currently positioned when it comes to obsolescence?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. It's my second time here, and I've been coming to the Kingdom since about 2005, which I think is a nice backdrop to think about how much has changed. Just when we talk about obsolescence, we normally think of legacy technology and how we adapt and change. It's interesting that we're having that conversation here at the Global Cybersecurity Forum in a quite new and modern country that doesn't have a lot of existing legacy, perhaps less than others. I'm privileged to be an executive board member on SIRAR, which is a young company that we spun out of STC, the telco, with a young team that is addressing a lot of the problems that are emerging now in the Kingdom, or the opportunities, if you like. And that, when I think of the obsolescence question, I'd like to just take a step back. You know, if we were having this conversation 200 years ago, and we were talking about critical infrastructure, probably the two things that would stand out would be a lighthouse and telegraph lines, right? Two things that don't really exist anymore, or maybe they do as a tourist attraction. They existed for a long time. Technology didn't have much of an effect on them. Lighthouses went from using wood to oil to electricity. Telegraph had Morse code and other things, but they generally didn't change. And now we're in an environment where the thing that fundamentally changes the obsolescence of critical infrastructure is technology. It's just compressed in such a short space of time. And if you were to think of just three things in business, telecommunications, we now have 5G, that's made 4G obsolete, that's made 3G obsolete. We have multi-core processors, we've got the cloud, there's so many things there. So what does that mean? When I look at that from a SIRAR perspective, the ultimate question is, we know that things that we're dealing with today are going to be obsolete tomorrow. So how do we plan around that? And I think back to, you know, the best trait in evolution is to be adaptive, to be adaptable, to accept those things that are coming. So from our perspective, it's not to be too fixed in our ideas, to be able to have flexibility to say, we need to adapt, we need to change. And that has to be pervasive throughout the organization as a culture, as an approach to R&D, as an approach to training, as a diversity of the workforce. And when I look at what we're trying to achieve with SIRAR, I think that sits behind that. When I look at the numbers that we have in terms of what we're doing, the people, the projects they're working on, I think in the background we're preparing ourselves for a constantly changing world and how we can help our business and government clients adapt to that.
What are the leading causes of obsolescence? Let's take it back to basics. And how do we make sure that they're on our radar, that we're aware of what we need to be fixing? Let me come to you, Joshua, first.
Yeah, well, look, I think the biggest one is technology. I mean, and we're now living in, I don't know, is it the fourth or is it the fifth industrial revolution? You know, the rate of change of ChatGPT and large language models it's happening right now. I mean, when we look at the first industrial revolution with steam and others with electrification and automation and mechanization, those things took decades to happen. We're looking at things that are happening now in literally months. So I think that the technological change, which poses so many challenges, the things we define as critical infrastructure, there are many, many more of those. The regulations around them, I mean, look at AI, we haven't even begun to get our heads around that. And I used to work in government, with all due respect to government, we're not normally on the cusp of technology and the ability to regulate it, and we tend to go through a cycle of making something illegal, compulsory, obsolete. These cycles happen. So I think the big one for me is technology, the pace of the change, the depth of the change, whether it's space, quantum, AI, 5G. And there are other things that sit behind that, we might bring in a new navigation system for airlines, which makes a whole fleet of aircraft obsolete. Or we might driverless cars. It's probably going to make me as a driver obsolete. There's a range of those things. Or traffic signals might be obsolete, or railway signals. So I think that as we devolve to harness all of the benefits of this next digital transformation, enabled by this amazing new technology that's out there, it will create a wave of obsolescence. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but it does pose many, many questions to how we're going to secure it, how we're going to regulate it, etc., which we're only just thinking about.
Well, let's talk about security and regulation, not least for a variety of sectors, because the impact is different, of course, across many different industries. In Tunisia, Dr. Yassine, what regulation do you want to see? What is it critical to put in place to make sure that there is a more manageable, seamless transition?
Yeah, well, we deal with this regulation. When we focus on the content of this regulation regarding critical infrastructure, we will find that there is some restrictions that should be applied for this infrastructure regarding if the components are certified against a set of criteria. So we should keep this constraint available in order to implement the needed replacement updates in time in order to comply with this law. This is a first point that should be mentioned regarding this obsolescence. Now, another problem that should be also presented is related to the act of replacement. When we make the needed upgrade for the hardware, either the hardware or the software, especially for the government companies, when we need to plan to get the budget. And this time, to plan the needed budget and to get the needed amount in order to be able to make this change in order to be compliant with the law may be for a long period, and this period will be also another issue for our infrastructure. So this is among the aspect that should be also discussed, and we should find solution for that in order to reduce this time and to be able to make the needed change in an efficient time.
Thank you.
So this is another issue that should be also discussed.
Ben, when it comes to budgeting, when it comes to spending, protecting ourselves, making ourselves more resilient, sometimes the CapEx is not there, or even the OpEx, as we were discussing backstage. So what level of preparedness and protection do companies and entities tend to have today? If you were to give us the broad view, how protected or how exposed are we when it comes to obsolescence and the vulnerabilities that causes?
Sure, yeah. Sure. I think the challenge within many of the critical infrastructure environments is around the idea of first 10 years ago, we were segmented, we're okay. Or actually, no, it was air-gapped. We're air-gapped, we're not touching any other systems, we're fine. And then it moved to what we're segmented, so we're protected. And now with the age of digital transformation, and we're adding more systems that are talking to each other, and they're more homogeneous, so they're very similar from an attack surface perspective. We have this challenge now where we can't just rely on prevention. It's getting in front of that. So when prevention fails, what's next? And the old proverb, chance favors the prepared. How are we getting in front of an attack so we have the right visibility to detect them when they're in their environment? And backstage, we were talking about a recent case my team supported, ransomware related, that affected a traffic control system. They were within that environment in an order of months, and it wasn't until they deployed the ransomware that they were detected. Pretty obvious at that point. But there's an opportunity there if you're deploying the right technology to create that visibility. I think that's when you're dealing with old technology, and by old technology, I mean systems that went end of life 8 years ago. The mitigations there are creating visibility and understanding what's happening within those environments.
It may be basic to observe, but the actors are moving faster than we are. The technology is moving faster than companies and even governments are. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we step one step ahead? You've given some solutions, but what would your key advice to entities, to governments, to companies in the room be?
It really does come back to the idea of prevention does eventually fail. And so not just creating a strong architecture, but a defensible architecture. So that means people that are actively monitoring the systems and able to respond, and creating the expectation that the operators and the engineers know what to do if there is a response action, if a facility if it were to go into a dangerous state is actually a human safety issue. It's not my database is corrupt. Like that there's a degree of impact there that's really important to understand. And those staff members that are in that facility need to understand how to operate in an environment where they might be given the wrong information and make the wrong choices because of that. That's the leading edge in training and where we need to build towards.
Thank you. Major General, how are you minimizing the impact of obsolescence in India? What examples can you point to?
India is a huge country, has got a huge cyberspace. If we look at the numbers, we have about 800 million internet users. We have 1.3 billion people using these phones, wherein the large quantity of them is smartphones. So the interconnectedness is very heavy. If we look at the overall payment landscape, it's in, say, 10 billions of transactions happening every month. And they run into billions of rupees. So it's a huge landscape. If I look at the resilience aspects at the strategic level, we are addressing it at the policy and the strategy level. Then we have the governance. Governance of cyberspace is being addressed through suitable governance structures. We have huge amount of infrastructure development, capacity building programs. That's at the strategic level. And if we come to the tactical level, we are putting in place all issues which contribute to the resilience, whether it is the crisis management plan or whether it is putting in place resilient infrastructure, having disaster recovery, backup plans for the data, the network resilience, the network time protocol, the DNS systems, the safety and security of our submarine cables is all that is being put in place. So it's something, a work in progress. We are doing fairly well to secure our cyberspace.
It's a work in progress. Joshua, talk to me about the biggest pain point, transitioning from legacy to modern technologies and infrastructures and reinforcing those core infrastructure systems. Where is the weakness, or what's the biggest headache, if we can call it that?
So I think in a word, it's people. You always hear people are our greatest asset. They're also incredibly hard to change, they're hard to train, they're hard to find, they're hard to keep. I used to have a very large team with a lot of people. I'm sure I miss them individually, but in aggregate, less so. So I think the people piece is hard. But I just want to pick up on a theme that was talked about there, and Rebecca, you mentioned it with minimise. There seems to be sometimes, maybe often in the security vendor community, this obsession with making something absolutely safe. I can tell you, absolute security is absolutely impossible. And so if you think of that in the context of critical infrastructure, I think historically the government had more of the ownership of those assets, power stations and the like. And today, if I was to define critical infrastructure in my house, it's probably Netflix, and it's probably the Uber deliveries and Grab and all these sort of things. So I think that poses a couple of questions, right? The first of it is, let's not always assume that it's the government's fault and the government has to fix things, but that the other side of it is, as a consumer of that service, whether it is provided by the government or not, maybe we do have to have an idea around resilience and good enough to be able to get there. We manage perfectly well without these things. Suddenly it's invented, it owes us a favour. Why can't I have Wi-Fi streaming on the aeroplane? So I think we have to recalibrate that discussion. And that's a subtle political piece as well of what we expect of our political leaders. And maybe I'm being kind because I used to be in that frame. But the key thing, I suppose, when I look at moving from legacy through to the next generation is, in the absence of a really good strategic plan, you end up doing these tactical things and you amass a whole bunch of stuff and you feel secure because you've got one of everything, and that doesn't really happen. So I think a better approach is to be able to say, this has a shelf life, it's an interim solution, we're planning to do something else, we're going to have a modular style architecture, we're going to have a relationship with our vendors, that they're going to be part of the upgrade process, that it's not, there's a lot of people involved in legacy infrastructure to get from where you are to where you need to be, and I think there's interesting contracts that you can write with your technology providers. You can kick the question to them. I've been to multiple conferences where you walk in, and if you're someone trying to buy a solution, you'd be baffled. There's 4,000 things, all with a variation of shadow this, carbon that, trace this, and it's quite baffling. I think the other part of it is we always think that it's some super sophisticated hacker, probably criminal gang backed by a state. I can tell you, in the lion's share, a lot of these things are kind of mistakes that people make. It goes back to the people thing because they're not trained, they don't understand it, they don't know what they're doing. It's a complex problem. I don't think it's going to be easily solved by perfect technology solutions. I think it's about redundancy, resiliency, a discussion with people. Maybe I would say that because as a service provider.
Of course, he would never say that as a service provider. I've got to bring in Ben here. It takes many people. It takes a village. Absolutely safe is absolutely impossible. Do you agree?
That it takes a village?
That it's possible.
Oh, that it's possible. I think it depends on what your end goal is. I think if you're focused on creating a robust, resilient, defensible system, absolutely. If it's about preventing all attacks, or that we're 100% bulletproof secure, I don't think that's a reality that we live in. And even if it were, it would be very transitory of, hey, we reached this state, and there's a new technology, there's a new capability that the adversary is deploying that pushes everything to the side. I think a lot of our customers, as an example, focus on secure remote access. I've seen adversaries take advantage of secure remote access and use those appliances and that equipment to actually gain access, unauthorized access. So it's always a cat and mouse game, and it's a journey, not a destination.
Speaking of cat and mouse, or perhaps friction of a different kind, IT and OT. What's the future? Never the twain shall meet. One will always outpace the other, or have a disagreement, shall we say?
Yeah, well, you had in your last question, you had a great phrase that stuck out, actually, legacy. I think perhaps in many environments, the IT teams see all the, what they would call legacy equipment and software that's deployed at, pick your type of infrastructure, refinery, generation plant, green energy, they see that as legacy. That plant was built maybe 10 years ago. It's not legacy. It's that the pace of change is way different than IT. It's not a phone. And so that the life cycle there is entirely different. And it's not, again, on, we need to patch all your systems all the time. So that would put that facility in outage. And so that's that friction, right? Of actually, we're generating the revenue for the business. Why are you creating downtime when we're actually operating and building the capacity that's needed for the business? So there's that tension that exists. And I think as we understand the mission, as IT staff understands the mission of the facility and the constraints of the facility and works within those constraints rather than trying to constrain that revenue generating asset, I think that's where the conversation needs to go.
Okay. I wish we had more time. We need to talk about collaboration as well, but sadly the clock has beaten us. But ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking my fantastic guests for their contribution today.